Now, when we're looking with what happened here in Colorado, very often you've said Trump's got to watch what he says. It has implications. Do you feel any sense of regret about how you characterized what was going on at Planned Parenthood after the attack in Colorado because of what the man said, which seems as though he was influenced by some of the rhetoric that was coming out of you and others that painted a very ugly picture, an unfair one, about Planned Parenthood?
Oh, please. Really, Chris? Look, 9 videotapes have come out about Planned Parenthood. It is very clear what they have been doing. And in fact, Planned Parenthood several weeks ago made a quiet little announcement that they would no longer accept compensation for the sale of what they call fetal tissue. That's about as close to an admission as you can get. In fact, it is an admission. Look, what happened in Colorado is a terrible thing. This guy is a deranged murderer, and I hope he is put away for life. It may be that we should be classifying that as domestic terrorism as well, but that has nothing to do with the truth of what is going on in Planned Parenthood. And this is a typical left-wing tactic to try and shut down the truth by silencing people. This has happened over and over and over again.
Ms. Fiorina,
let's focus on...
The question doesn't go away. The videos were edited. You know that. The scenes that were depicted...
I don't know that.
Well,
there has been forensic evidence of those 9 videotapes over and over again. There have been reports that say they are not edited. So
of course they were edited.
It's amazing to me that we're still having this conversation.
No. Let's be careful about what we're saying. Of course they were edited. What you're saying is
let's be very careful about what we're saying,
You're
Chris.
saying that
let's be very careful about what we're saying.
You're saying that the raw portions of the video substantiate the claims that you and others made. That has not been proven to any satisfaction in any objective way. There were scenes and pictures depicting horrible things that nobody should want to see that weren't authentic and weren't germane to the conversation within the video. We had the guy on
Chris,
here. He couldn't justify it. Now you had somebody who went out and killed in the name of that.
Really? Really? Okay, I don't recall, Chris. Careful. You're a journalist.
Yes.
I don't recall anybody in the pro-life community celebrating this tragedy. I don't recall any of that happening. And I also know for a fact that Planned Parenthood, by the way, have you ever watched those videos?
Yes, I have.
You ought to if you haven't.
I have.
You really ought to if you haven't.
I have,
But I don't understand why Planned Parenthood would make an announcement that they're no longer accepting compensation.
To clarify a policy that was used to villainize them when they felt that there was no need to do that. That's what the head of the organization says.
It's clear what your opinion is, Chris. It's clear what your opinion is.
What's my opinion, Ms. Fiorina? What do you think it is?
Well, I think you've bought the Planned Parenthood line, hook, line, and sinker. So good to know that.
No, what I'm saying is I'm asking you if you feel that coming out of Colorado, it gave you any new sense of the power of rhetoric and what it can do, especially when it's playing on a sensitive issue like abortion, because of what we just saw with, as we agree, this deranged man who went out and killed in the name of saving the baby parts.
Okay, so in other words, you would also accept that President Obama's rhetoric might incite people when he is standing in the Philippines and saying that anyone who opposes any of his policies, whether it's the Iran deal or stopping Syrian refugees, when he says that some of us, like me, like other Republicans, are as bad as the Iranian hardliners shouting death to America, or that we are as bad, we're giving ISIS recruitment tools. You would say that that rhetoric is a problem as well? I mean, it is unconscionable, to use your word, to deride people who are conservative, their rhetoric, but not to acknowledge that the left uses incendiary rhetoric all the time. It is not objective to say that the left wing does not try and shut down conversation that they don't want to have by accusing people of inciting others. This has happened in election cycle after election cycle. Remember Sarah Palin? Sarah Palin was somehow responsible for the murder, the attack on Gabby Gifford. It turned out that wasn't true either.
Well,
welcome to another edition of Christian Answers. My name is Pastor Jeff Short, and I will attempt to break down some of the contemporary moral issues of our day. I say moral issues of our day because a lot of people who look upon the Christian church and they look upon Christian leaders who are talking about issues in the news, they say, well, that's political. These people are getting political. They should stay in their field of religion. They should stay in the Bible. They should stay in the church. They shouldn't be delving into politics. But here's the problem with that. The issues that we're talking about are moral. These are issues that are mentioned in the Bible. These are issues that are taught. As Christians, we are to follow the moral law of God. And when you bring in morality into the culture, some of these issues are political. They happen to be political. We don't seek them out. For example, as a minister, as an ordained minister of the gospel, I do not emphasize and I do not try to dwell upon purely political issues. There are so many political issues out there to comment on. There is immigration. There is taxation. There is foreign policy. You can go on and on. It's an endless, bottomless pit of topics of conversation. And I do have opinions on those things, as everyone else has opinion. But I don't want to waste my time as a minister spending all of my time talking about pure politics when there are more important things to talk about, and that is the moral and spiritual issues that are the most important, by the way, of all. People think that political issues are most important. That's only a superficial summary of the situation. Really, we are taught by the Lord Jesus Christ in the Bible. We're taught in the New Testament, the apostles and the prophets. We're taught in the Old Testament by the prophets that the most important things in life are moral and spiritual things. These are the most important things. Economics, that's important, but not as important as the spiritual state of a soul. For example, what's more important? Getting yourself into a situation where you are with God forever and ever in eternal life, the state of your soul forgiven and redeemed by Jesus Christ so that you are set for heaven, or whether you can have a good economic life for 20, 30 years on earth. Well, it's obvious. Eternity is a lot more important than temporal life on earth. Eternal life is the most important thing of all, of course. Temporary life is temporary. It's only going to be here a few decades at most. Most of us will not live much beyond 70, 80, or perhaps if we're lucky, 90 years. But eternity is forever. And so obviously the most important issues that we need to talk about and get right in this life are the eternal issues. And so that's why I want to spend more time on moral and spiritual issues, because that's what the Bible spends more time on, the moral spiritual issues. You look at Jesus and his apostles, and they did not sit around debating Roman public policy. They did not sit around talking politics and economics. They might have touched on a few economic and political issues in their generally focused view of spirituality and morality. And that's the way we should be. We should be good citizens, and we should vote, and we should know what the issues are, and we should make wise decisions when we're asked to vote, and we are in a democratic society asked to vote. And so obviously we have to know what it is that we're going to vote on. We have to know what the issues are and what the questions are, so that when we step up to the ballot box, we know what to vote for. And we should allow our Christian worldview, our biblical understanding of reality, to affect our vote. So when you're talking about Democrats and Republicans, when you look at the Democratic Party for today, for example, as a Christian, if you're going to vote from your Christian biblical worldview, if you're going to allow your own Christian morality and your own Christian spiritual perspective to have an effect on how you vote, well, you're not going to vote much for Democratic candidates. And the reason you're not going to vote for Democratic candidates is because they represent things that almost entirely are diametrically opposed to the Christian worldview, or the worldview that the Bible communicates to us. For example, recently we've had to deal with these issues of gender, so-called gender identity, and where you have people who feel in their mind and their emotions that they identify more with the member of the opposite sex than they do their own sex. So in other words, a woman born a girl gets into high school and starts talking to her mixed up, crazy, foolish friends, and they start concluding that maybe they should really be boys. And so the girl, for example, may decide that she wants to identify as a boy, and now she wants to be referred to as a he, and now she has gone so far as to maybe even get her name changed. So she goes to the principal of the school and says, I am no longer Sarah, I am now a Tom, and I would like to be referred to as a he, and my name shall be Tom from this point on. And our government at this point in history is so foolish itself that now they're presenting policies to schools and saying, if a student decides that they want to identify as a boy, even though they are biologically a girl, if they want to be called by a boy's name, Tom, instead of their real biological name at birth, Sarah, that the schools, the teachers, the administrators, and other students must refer to them in their new so-called identity. And this is just plain outright foolishness. And as Christians, we need to say that God has assigned people from birth what they should be. If a baby girl is born, that girl is now growing up to be a woman. If the baby boy is born, that baby boy is now grown and destined by God to be a man. And it is not within the realm of authority of a person to now go back and say, well, you know, I think I want to be the opposite of what I was born. No, that is rebellion. That is what the Bible calls sin. That is what the Bible calls sinful, willful rebellion against your Creator. Now, what about this girl who wants to be identified as a boy? Well, what she needs is counseling, not catered to in this delusion. She needs to be sat down, whether many sessions or few sessions or whatever, she needs to be in counseling with someone who can help her in her mental problem. And that's what it is. It is a mental problem. It is a mind problem. It is an emotional problem. There are all kinds of psychiatric and psychological problems in the world today. There are all kinds of labels. And if you want to find out all of these psychiatric, psychological problems, you can consult the textbooks that are out there. There are fields of study that you can go into and find out all of these maladies of the mind. And one of the maladies of the mind is a sexual confusion. And as fallen creatures, as people born after Adam and Eve that have to suffer the effects of original sin, we have all kinds of problems. We are all messed up in some way, shape, and form. And so, with some people, it happens to be that they think that they identify with a member of the opposite sex rather than their own sex. They think, for example, in the illustration I gave earlier, that the girl, she thinks she should be identified as a boy and wants to have society recognize her as a boy instead of a girl. And what she's really suffering under is a mental delusion. She's suffering under a psychological problem. Now, we don't need to point fingers at her and say, oh, look at her, and call her a freak and make fun of her, but she needs help. She needs help. We don't, under any circumstances, need to encourage her delusion, and we don't, under any circumstance, need to have our government then be a champion for her sickness and say, whatever you say you are, that's what you are, and we will cater to you. Can you imagine the chaos society would fall under when you have people who are trying to take what is wrong with them mentally and push it on society to the point where now the government pushes the insanity? You know, this is what we're encountering. And so as Christians, when we look at people, and this is coming from the Democratic Party, it's going to be put right into their platform this year because it's an election year. The Democrats are pushing this transgender agenda. They're pushing the LGBTQ agenda. And every single thing that comes along with it, they're pushing. And so as a Christian, if you look at the Democratic Party and you say, do I want that? Do I want to promote that? Do I want to empower these people to push this insanity on us all? Then no, you don't want that. You don't want values that are contrary to the biblical values. You don't want this transgenderism being promoted. And that's what you get from the Democratic Party. Now, what about the Republican Party? Well, it's becoming more and more like the Democratic Party in the sense that there are more and more Republicans in leadership that are basically saying, we're fine with the direction that that's going. We're fine with this transgenderism. We're fine with this LGBTQ agenda. In other words, instead of standing up to this, which the Republican Party has traditionally opposed, these kinds of initiatives, these kind of odd and quirky kind of fringe radical stuff like this, instead of opposing that, there are more and more Republican voices that are basically saying, well, you know, let's go along with it. You know, if it's not gonna hurt anybody, or and such, those kind of arguments. Well, that's nonsense. And so what you're seeing is a totally sold out Democratic Party, totally anti-Christian in its value system on these issues, on these on sexuality and marriage and family and so forth, totally sold out. So as a Christian, you look at the Democrats and say, there's no way I can vote for any of those people, any of those leadership, because if I did, I'd be promoting that. I'd be promoting sin. I'd be promoting rebellion against God, the God of the Bible. So we can't do that. But now when you look to the Republican Party, in a lot of cases, you find the same problem. You see candidates who are beginning to promote the transgender agenda. You begin to see them compromising on their own professed values. You know, you see Christians in the Republican Party who seemingly can contradict themselves, and they can say, well, I'm a Christian and I believe in the Bible and I believe in Christian morality, but yet I'm going to promote this foolish notion that people can assign themselves their own gender, assign themselves their own identity. And you're getting more and more of these Republicans now who are willing to contradict their own Christian values and contradict their own values, morality, spirituality, and say, well, we're doing it for the good of our society. We want to keep the peace. We want to be in harmony. And we want to get along with our other citizens in this country instead of being constantly at war with them. Well, that is discouraging because we now have two major parties in this country, the way it's worked out, and it's seemingly both of them now are selling out in their values. And it seems like there are very few voices on the stage that actually stand for the biblical Christian worldview that Republicans have, at least in name, stood for. We have, for example, the Republicans have always stood for human life, sanctity of human life. They've always stood against abortion, the taking of a human life in the womb, the killing of an unborn person in the womb. But the way things are going, in a few more years, the Republicans will even drop that. But now they're talking about accepting the so-called same-sex marriage, which is an abomination of marriage the way God gave it. It says in the book of Genesis that in the beginning he created them male and female. And Jesus himself in the New Testament says, and for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be joined together with his wife, and the two will become one flesh. Well, what will become one flesh? The man and the woman. And so you have a teaching from Jesus Christ that the pattern for marriage is male and female. Very clear. Christians should all understand that. And yet we have Christians in the Republican Party. I'm not even going to talk about the Christians, so-called Christians in the Democratic Party, because those people, I can't understand how you can even participate and promote anything in that party and call yourself a Christian, because you are standing for and promoting all kinds of abominations and sins. But now the Republican Party is following that same sinful pattern, and you have Christians in the Republican Party saying, well, we'll stand for so-called gay marriage, we'll stand for the transgender agenda for policy reasons. Well, that is a contradiction. As a contradiction of your values. As Christians in America, we are free to vote our values. We have a voice. Now, a lot of places around the world, citizens do not have a voice. If you go over to a lot of the countries in the Middle East, the Arab states, you are not asked what you think about this or that. You are not asked, you are not consulted on public policy. And therefore, you don't have a voice. You can't voice your values. Well, in the United States, we are free to voice our values. And we need to have our values formed from some basis. As Christians, we are formed from the Bible. The Bible informs us and forms us in morality. And when we look at the transgender agenda, for example, and these ridiculous LGBTQ transgender activists promoting the idea that one can go into the bathroom of their choice. You can be a girl, for example, as I illustrated before, and begin to identify as a boy. So then that entitles you to go into the boys' bathroom. Or you can be a boy, and for some reason you feel more in touch with the women than the men, so more comfortable with women than men. So you want to identify with the women. So you can be a boy, but you can go into the girls' bathroom now just because you feel that way. And the school administrators, principals, teachers, and other students have to just accept that because you want to go in there and you feel that you identify as female, so they have to let you in there. This is ridiculous, people. This is ridiculous, and it's being promoted from the highest levels of our government. And as Christians, we have to stand against this and say, God made them male and female. If you're born a boy, you will grow up to be a man, and you should be treated as a boy when you're a boy and a man when you grow up. And when you're born a girl, you will grow up to be a woman, and you need to be treated as a girl and treated as a woman. And if you're a girl, you don't go into the boys' bathroom. If you're a boy, you don't go into the girls' bathroom. It's just common sense. Not only do we have a biblical teaching on this subject, we have logic, we have reason, we have experience. And in the cases of those rare instances, and there are instances of these very rare, where a person is born with both the female and the male anatomy, in those very rare instances, well then the person must choose the gender that they corresponds most with them. It's totally different than what is being promoted today. And we need to have compassion for those people. There are always going to be those kind of people. 0.0000001% of the whole population, hardly enough to even mention, but there will be those kind of people. And there always have been those kind of people. And society has dealt with that okay. There are women who look mannish. There are men who look somewhat feminine. But if you understand the basic categories, there's not going to be a problem. But there is going to be a problem when you begin to teach children in schools and young people that they can choose their gender. That's going to produce problems. As Christians, we have to oppose that, and therefore we have to oppose the Democrat Party, and we have to never, ever, ever waste our vote on a Democratic candidate who opposes our Christian values, because they do oppose Christian values. They're promoting this thing full scale. And when the Democrats have their convention this summer, you're going to see the whole transgender agenda promoted by Democrats. That's why as Christians we should never vote for a Democrat. Now, the Republican Party, like I said, we're going to keep an eye on them. But if they're going to follow the Democrats in selling out Christian values, we're not going to vote for them either. It's just that simple. If the Republicans want to leave the values of Christianity at the door and move on and follow the Democrats, only maybe 10, 20 years behind them, then as Christians we have to leave them too. And there could be a situation, there could be a scenario coming up in this next election where Christians just don't vote for anybody. And that's a real possibility, because it doesn't help saying that, well, this person is a lot worse than this person. If they're both unqualified, unfit for office, you don't vote for anybody. You don't empower anybody. And then maybe the parties will learn, hey, there's a lot of people not voting. Maybe we better listen. What do they want? But if you continue to empower bad people, they're going to continue to do bad things. So as Christians, we need to be careful. We need to be looking at the issues from a Christian moral, spiritual standpoint, not get bogged down in all the politics of it, and just ask ourselves, do I want to empower this rebellion against God? Do I want to empower that? No. Whether it's Democrat or Republican, we don't want to empower evil. We never want to empower sin, and we don't want to sign our names to something that we'll later regret. And so I hope that you think through these issues. I encourage you to think through these issues. Never violate your Christian principles. Never violate. Never go against the will of God. That's the safest bet. Well, we'll see you back here next week on another edition of Christian Answers. God bless.